So this is the very first practice day I had. Or actually no, this is day 2 or 3. My balance is horrible. I'm still actually very stiff now, but I'm pretty good at coping with it. So I appear much better. This looks horrible. Very horrible. Going against John.
If you notice in my matches, whenever I race up, they push me back.
Right.
So you have to stay low, move around a lot.
Okay. I couldn't hear any of that. Heard it all once I saw the videos. Generally speaking, when I'm in a match, whether it's practice or official, I can't hear all that stuff, you know. People cheer me on, not unless you're right there, right next to me. Then, you know, I can hear everything you're saying. But once I start, usually once I get started, I mean, I'm in my own world, so that kind of stuff, it doesn't really affect me unless you say it beforehand. You want to give me some words of encouragement before I go up? You know, it'll probably lift my spirits, most likely. But during the match, I'm focused on my opponent. Usually it's just me and them. So, you know, the words of encouragement, to an extent, they fall on deaf ears. It's not that I don't appreciate it. I just don't notice it. It's an interesting camera angle.
Top lightweight competitors to 85 kilograms, or about 187 pounds. And here he is in the opening rounds, about 5'6" Minde against 6'5" Monster. A lot is expected, as the Mongolians usually get gold or silver.
So I think this was my first match going against the Mongolian.
Rounds, about 5'6" Minde against 6'5" Monster. Takes him down with the leg kick there. Great technique.
So he got me with, let's see, what is the name of the throw? He got me with uchigake, which is inside leg trip. He is very good at leg trips. He's good at a lot of throws. In practice, the days I practiced with him, he actually went for sotogake, which is outside leg trip. But during the tournament, when he beat me, he used uchigake, inside leg trip. Yeah, Menge he's a great wrestler. He let me beat him once in practice, our first day going against each other. I beat him, and after that, he never let me beat him again. So this clip, I think this particular clip, is when I wrestled against Gabe Unit, I believe is his last name. When I beat Gabe, it was with Uchari, a pivot throw. there's another wrestler here. There's another wrestler that I went against that I beat with the same throw. I think his name is Ralph. He was one of our newer guys. And against both of them, I used Uchari, pivot throw, and I won. So those were my second and third matches. And I think it was after I beat Ralph. Trent Sable, he told me, he said, okay, I see you're a one-trick pony. He said, that ain't gonna work against me or the Mongols. And sure enough, it didn't work against him. Great wrestler, another great wrestler.
Here's
one of the
Monster, the
Americans.
tallest competitor at 6'5", and
Here's Ralph, another Uchari. That was actually pretty much the only throw that I could successfully pull off my entire first year, as far as in the ring, under pressure. I could do pushing and thrusting, but the thing is, if you need to lock up on the belt, pushing and thrusting is kind of out of the question unless you could get space. So the past few years, I've actually been devoting my time to learning Yotsu Sumo, which is belt sumo. And that's what a lot of the higher division pros use. Some of them believe it's more honorable for some of them, because Yotsu Sumo is actually what's considered wrestling. So sumo is made up of three parts. You have the initial charge, you have Tsukiyoshi Sumo or Oshi Sumo, which is push and thrust style or push style, and then you have Yotsu Sumo, which is belt fighting. Belt fighting is what's technically considered wrestling. So you have wrestling, pushing and thrusting, and then your initial charge. So when I first showed up to practice, I realized that I know how to push and thrust. Generally speaking. I know how to charge, but I'm not exactly the best wrestler. So I've been devoting my time to learning wrestling. Now I believe I know a decent amount, so I'm trying to integrate everything, mix it, find balance. But during this first tournament, I had 8 days of coaching, and all I could successfully do in the ring was Uchari. And I could barely do that. I only successfully pulled it off against new players, guys that came there just a little bit after I did. And they had absolutely no sumo experience, whereas I've been training on my own, so I was a tad bit knowledgeable.
U.S. Sumo Open. Moving on to quarterfinals. 1 loss, 2 wins.
That forcefulness in my voice, that would be performance anxiety. Not even from the tournament. That performance anxiety was actually just from filming that. I was so nervous. I've had performance anxiety probably since I was 7. I made my first song when I was 5 and wrote my first song when I was 7. And I sang it a couple of times. The second time I sang it, there was a broken microphone, and I yanked it off the microphone stand. It busted me in my gums, and I watched a chunk of my gums bounce around on the carpet through tears, had blood spilling from my mouth. And performing, generally speaking, has never been the same since. So just recording that little clip, that forcefulness that came out in my voice, it wasn't that I was exhausted or, sometimes my voice is naturally rough. That was performance anxiety all the way. And I still have it a little bit. So these little guys, they walked around. I was walking around just before this, and they took a walk around, I think, the entire arena, the entire auditorium. And when they saw me, they came down and asked me if I could give them my autograph. And I think this was actually after I lost to Trent, and I was eliminated. So that to me was interesting. I went in the tournament. I went in the tournament, new guy, nobody knew my name. I was on a little podcast just before. But generally speaking, that wasn't much, you know. It wasn't like I had a big name and I went there. I already had a fan base. When I got to that tournament, I was surprised at how many fans I had. You know, I went there expecting to pretty much be on my own, you know, besides family and friends who came and the guys that I wrestled with. I'm not used to having any fans outside of people I already know. So for me to go there and have these kids and then have adults, you know, tell me that they love the way I wrestled, they'll come to see me next year, all of that was a little bit overwhelming, but for the most part, I mean, it left me excited. I think that was the greatest experience of my first tournament. Not even so much finally having my first wrestling tournament and martial arts tournament period. I think it was how I was received. You know, there was one guy, he actually started this, it's his fault. I went and I took, I believe it was a picture with 2 of my sisters. And when this guy saw me taking pictures with them, he ran over to me and he asked me if I could take a picture with this baby. So he hands this baby to me, and I have the baby. I look at the baby looks at me, the baby doesn't know what's going on. And we look back at him, and he takes the picture. And he says, "Oh, good." He kisses his baby. And I realized, you know, this is a Japanese guy. One of the superstitions they have in Japan for sumo is that when a baby is held by a wrestler, then that baby will grow up to be as great, maybe even greater than that wrestler that held them. So that made me feel really good. Some of them simply believe that. They believe it's sort of like a blessing through the power of touch. Some of them look at the wrestlers as gods. I don't know how far he was taking it in his heart, but that was really interesting to me. I really appreciate that, for him to consider that, you know, I'm a good enough wrestler, a good enough person to bless his baby through the power of touch. So that to me was very awing. You know, I was very surprised at that. I still am. You know, that's honestly the first and only experience that I know of that was, you know, obvious to me. So that's a great experience. Trent Sable. Trent is one of the top competing Americans, and he actually has been for a while. I believe since he's been there, Trent has been one of the top competing Americans. He told me about his training. When, you know, he wanted to get really good training, USA Sumo wasn't necessarily as well established as it is now, or not established at all. And so he actually spent thousands of dollars, went to Japan, and got his coaching straight from them. You know, spent the time, spent the money, dedicated himself to the training. Now resources are a little more available out here, and it's just sharpening his skills. So, you know, I've heard him talk about retiring. I honestly don't think Trent is ready to retire anytime soon. I think for Trent to retire, he would pretty much have to be seriously disabled. Because I know he's gone into a tournament stiff, but, you know, he didn't let that stop him. So I think for Trent to retire, he would have to be seriously disabled. He's a great wrestler. This guy's been wrestling maybe since before I was born. I'm 23 right now. I'd say he's been wrestling around that time, since before I was born. So this guy is very well experienced, and I had a great time wrestling with Trent. I won't say that I intended to be thrown, but for him to pull out that technique against me it was an honor because he told me afterwards that he didn't think he would have to get that serious with me. So you could look at it as a bitter defeat, but we actually wrestled the night before, and I beat him a couple of times, and he said, okay, you can kind of adapt a little bit. And then after that, he didn't really let me beat him too much or at all. He took it easy on me, and he didn't have his belt on either. And I think that's one of the reasons why he underestimated me a little bit. Because he didn't have his belt on, I couldn't really grab him at all. But once it came tournament time, he tried to just force me out. But even though my arms were in a bad position, I had a hellish grip on his belt. My grip is pretty strong. The most weight I've picked up with my right pinky is 135 pounds. I do a lot of strength training, strongman training, so I had a very good grip on his belt. And because of that grip, he wasn't able to force me out as fast as he wanted to or as he wanted to. So he switched to Omata, which is a thigh scooping body drop. And yeah, so Trent is using, he pulled not only, I don't think it's a rare technique, but your techniques are pretty much categorized in 4 ways. Basically, you have frequent, which are the most common ones. The way I saw it is common, which is second to frequent. You have uncommon, and then you have rare. So, you have 4 different types of throws. You have frequent, common, uncommon, and then rare. I believe Omata thigh scooping body drop, which is what Trent used against me, I believe that is an uncommon throw, which is the way I learned it. And he pulled this technique out of the bag, and because that was my first time attacking his belt, he had to get a little more aggressive than he thought. You look at this guy's face. His face was red. Trent's face was so red. It looks like Trent was going to explode. His face was so red. And he told me he didn't think he had to go that hard against me. So he said I did good in that regard, and that made me feel really good. So it was an honor for me to have experienced that technique, because although I didn't come out, as good as I wanted to being a newbie, I did come out better than one of the veterans expected me to. And Trent's been with USA Sumo, I believe, since the beginning. So, 20 years. And now we have the very ugly open weight match. In all honesty, I can't remember his name. I believe it's Guprit. And he used Suki Otoshi. So this is, I'm going against Guprit. When we started, you can see he thought he was just going to push me out, thought he was going to push me back, because I was up very high. One of the problems I have, not only as a tall person, but because I tend to be very stiff. It's hard to stretch out and things like that. So Guprit thought he was just going to push me out. Didn't count on my strength resisting. So he kind of hesitated for a bit, and then he quickly adapted, realized I was off balance. And I labeled it as Suki Otoshi, which is a thrust down forward. And he used that, threw me. Honestly, that was embarrassing. I think I posted a picture of that when I was on the dojo. And just something to be real, be open, show my losses as well as my wins, humble myself a bit. Yeah. That was a hell of an experience. Went like that. Didn't expect it at all, but it happens. And this is my overall tournament record. So I have 2 wins, 3 losses. So lightweight division, I had loss, win, win, loss, and then in the open weight division, I lost to Dupree. And that was my first tournament. So yeah, it's interesting looking back on it, and thinking about where my head was at. When I went into that tournament, I wasn't thinking about, taking first. I wasn't thinking about, honestly, I won't say I didn't think about placing, but that wasn't my goal. I had the option to go into the tournament with 8 days of training or skip the tournament because I only had 8 days of training. And I said, well, it doesn't matter how many days of training I have. I think the better experience is to go since I'm not injured or anything. So I went 8 days of training, first time there, and I had a lot of guys that, they loved my name. My birth name is Phillip. My wrestling name, my Shikona is Monster. So a lot of people like that. One of the things they liked about it is the fact that even though I'm not the biggest player out there, I don't care what size I am. I named myself what I wanted. So I had a lot of guys that liked that. And then I had another guy, Ryan White, and he told me, he said, you came out of nowhere, You might not have won all your matches, but he said you definitely struck a nerve with the crowd. So, he's a trucker, last I checked, and, he gets to the tournaments and things, makes time for them. And so another dedicated wrestler. And, he's one of the guys that told me he looked forward to seeing me the next year. So, with that kind of encouragement, being received in that way by the fans, the veteran and familiar wrestlers in the tournament, that made me feel really good. And even though I was already planning to be there, just for me, I think, having that kind of encouragement solidified my plans even more. So, and whatever time of day you're watching this, I hope you've had a good day. I hope it's productive. I hope you enjoyed this. I'm trying to be more open, more entertaining. Not necessarily to put on a facade, but whether you're being real or fake, performing is a show. And I'm not only trying to be real, but I'm trying to put on a better show. I'm not always the most expressionate, not always the most charismatic, but I'm aiming to be. And this is one of the first products of my more charismatic self, and also at the same time, every performance that you have is practice, because every experience is something you can learn from. You can learn what you like, what you dislike, what to do, what not to do, what worked, what didn't, etc. So, stay tuned. Gonna have a lot more. I won't say how soon it's coming, but I will definitely be putting out more material, more posts. So, see you next time.
The silence fades into the night. Coyotes sing at the moonlight. These open highways are calling our name, and now it's time for us to escape.